Hey, welcome back to a new episode of Mindful Pulses. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty serious topic. Are we heading toward World War III? And what can you do to prepare? I watch a lot of YouTube channels, and it is fascinating to me to see that part of the information we see is relay of all the negativity and the bad things that are currently happening in the world. Do you even know how many conflicts are currently happening in the world? 5, 10, 20? Wrong. There are about 70 conflicts currently happening in the world. Let's talk about the situation in Russia, and really the fundamental point here is that, as someone famously said, geography is history, geography is destiny. There was an agreement that had been signed back in 2014-2015, the Minsk agreement, Minsk I and Minsk II, which were drafted to avoid any additional conflict in the Donbas region that resulted in basically everyone laying their weapons down. And yet this was not properly enforced, and we are where we are today. So there's been about 85 years now since we had the last global conflict, and some folks are saying that, men are destined to fight and to destroy one another, and whatever happens in between is an abnormality, and it's a really sad thing to think about this, but it might be true. What I think is the most terrifying is when you see President, just like President Macron of France, continuously poking the bear and making statements that really put at risk the country. And there are a few facts, like France is in capacity to run a war for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then they're out of ammunitions, and they are now through the voice of Macron saying that it is not a red line to potentially put soldiers in Ukraine or trainers in Ukraine. The problem that we see, and I know this firsthand because I've traveled a lot in Russia back in late 90s during the Glasnost, and I speak Russian. Я говорю русскому языку, and I know, more importantly, the culture of Russia. And let me tell you something. When you talk to Russians, they tend to take things literally. They don't necessarily have the subtlety or the fortitude to understand that you are being subtle, and you are just reinforcing a point of view. They literally think that you're going to put soldiers on the ground, and they are preparing accordingly. So there is a huge disconnect from a cultural standpoint, and I'm always shocked to see how badly our politicians and decision makers and lawmakers are being advised by a set of very poorly educated or experienced entourage. It doesn't take a PhD or a brain surgeon to understand that Russians, just like Chinese, have a very different way to strategically think and operate. It's very tied to culture. From a commercial standpoint, having dealt a lot with Asian, and I again speak Mandarin, when you sign a contract, it's really the beginning. And for the Western world, the US, Europe, when you sign a deal, that's the end of the story. In Asia, it's completely the opposite, or in Japan. So it's kind of a similar thing, right? So it is very, very scary to see this accumulation of threat and escalation of rhetoric and fundamentally, of course, I don't disagree that with a bully like Putin, you need to show strength. But the reality is that the 2014 and 15 Minsk 1 and 2 agreements were never respected, and who was responsible for that, right? We are partly responsible for that. I'm also very sensitive to what's happening between China and Taiwan. My wife is from Taiwan. I've spent years in Taiwan. I love Taiwan. I call them the Italians of Asia. And there is definitely a very high degree of uncertainty there, because while China has been talking about taking over for the last 30, 40 years, you can see how this is now sort of in motion and potentially accelerated by what we're doing. It's really sad, because I actually was back in 1997 in Hong Kong when Hong Kong was returned to China, and I remember that time quite vividly. It was incredible, and the amount of people that literally fled Hong Kong. A lot of them immigrated to Canada, Vancouver specifically, where I'll be in about 3 weeks. Anyway, you could easily see a scenario where all of these conflicts culminate if there is just one mistake that is made, whether it's someone of power that is assassinated or gets into a situation where they get killed, or whether we drop or Putin drops a bomb that tactical nuclear weapon, what have you. It is just mind-blowing to realize in this day and age, when we know that we have enough bombs to completely annihilate the world, that we're not actively spending all of our energies to find a solution. I really, that baffles me. We know it's literally a zero-sum game. We know that no one will win, and we know that the result of a nuclear conflict will be, there's no return from that, right? And I think that even those dictators have to realize, maybe through the eyes of their kids, that that is not a world you want to live in. So very scary. There is a tremendous chance for miscalculation that would end up in a situation that could not be repaired, and that is the danger. So we should have a lot of pressure being exercised and put on our politicians to actively sit at the table and negotiate. That's what not only what grown-ups do, but that's what responsible people that we put in place of power should be doing, literally. One of the primary responsibility for politicians is, to protect their civilians, right? Well, protecting their civilians doesn't mean that, you go on an attack. It means that you are actively defending peace, right? Anyway, very, very scary scenario, and I don't see the situation getting better if you also add what's happening now in Gaza what has been happening since. I won't get into the politics of it. I get the the atrocities committed by Hamas, this absolutely horrible terrorist organization, but I'm looking at this in terms of just the aggravation for the rest of the world. The surfers are enjoying an early morning. A lot of people don't realize, but if there was to the surfers are enjoying their early morning. A lot of people don't realize that, but if there ever was a nuclear attack, San Diego would be a prime target. And the crazy thing is that everybody's talking about early detection and whatnot. Bullshit. You know why? Because the subs are literally maybe 20 miles out. We just don't see them. But I guarantee you that Russian subs, as I speak, are probably somewhere out there. And if they were to launch a nuclear attack, this is not a 25-minute warning. It's more like a 4-minute warning. So let's that sink in, right?
So what's the most likely scenario? A nuclear attack? Probably not, hopefully. A blackout created by an EMP of kind, electromagnetic pulse in space that would create essentially blackouts and rolling blackouts, which that is, whether it's an atomic event in space or heat, is actually a very likely event in California, at least. And I think this is probably what, on a personal level, what you can certainly prepare the most for, because a lot of people don't realize, but if there is no more power, you don't have water anymore, water pressure, right? You're not able to fill up your tank. You're not able to use your credit card anymore. Cash is not available. Obviously you can go to the store. Everything is shut down, right? So that is one thing that every household should prepare for, and at a minimum take steps to be okay for at least several weeks, if not several months. I'm not a prepper. I don't believe in that philosophy, because I think that if we ever get to a point where we need to prep, that it will be too late, and there is nothing that can prepare you for essentially the end of the world. You also don't necessarily want to be the last guy standing from a philosophical standpoint, because I think that those last days or last few years will be horrible. It's like a slow death. But I do think that if you have a way to prepare a little bit to avoid any kind of situation where you're out of food or water, and prevent you from putting yourself in harm's way, because presumably there is a rolling blackout for several days or several weeks. You know, people are literally maybe 3 meals away from going insane, from, you know, complete chaos, right? So my recommendation, and what I have done in my own household, is I have the equivalent of I think 5 months or 6 months of water, family of 4, maybe 3 months of water, you know, and it's cheap. You can just buy a big plastic container and fill it up with drinking water, right? And make sure that it's protected from dust and things like that, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is I bought a lot of sardines and vegetables and things that I can store away. I also have, I should mention a huge solar installation in my house with with the batteries that essentially allow us to be completely off the grid. So if there is a rolling blackout, we can still probably be okay on basic things like basic lights. Internet wouldn't work anyway, even if we are still hooked up. But what you want is refrigeration. So in our case, we have a huge freezer. We don't have AC. We don't need air conditioning because we are so close to the ocean. So the Pacific Ocean is the natural air condition unit. But water is a big deal, and so I definitely put water away. And then the other thing that I did do, even though I drive a hybrid car, I don't drive an EV. I would never buy an EV. I think those are complete waste of money, and the infrastructure for electric vehicle is not set up yet. And more importantly, people just think that they're doing the right thing for the environment. They're not. It actually pollutes a lot to just build and create those vehicle, let alone the slavery aspect of having kids mining the cobalt and what any other ingredients necessary for battery usage, and most importantly, they just are throwaway cars, right? So those are cars that you will have to literally throw away after 8 to 10 years, which is a joke. I mean, it just contributes to incredible pollution. But people are starting to slowly awaken from the situation, and that's why you're seeing a tremendous amount of EVs sales slowing down, and even cost of EVs has dropped more than 40% since about a year ago. So, but I digress. So in my case, the solar installation that I have, which costed about 30 grand, allows me to have complete autonomy. There's lots of sun in San Diego, obviously, so I can probably be okay for an indefinite amount of time on refrigerator and light, right, and alarm systems. That's a big deal. But what I did on top of that is put a storage with gasoline. I think about 70 gallon of gasoline. Again, something that you can easily do. There are specialty containers that you can buy for this, and then you can add an additive that will keep the gasoline fresh for up to 2 years. It's an easy thing to do. I store that, of course, away from the house, away from anywhere where you can have flames. It's well ventilated. It's fairly cool, and it's away from the house. So if God forbids the containers were to go in flame, they wouldn't affect the house. At least I don't think so. So, and why do I have 70 gallons of gasoline? Because I actually calculated that this would be the necessary amount of gas that I would require without stopping to reach my house in Mexico, which is maybe the fourth or fifth point, which is, do you have a plan B? Do you have a safe haven? Do you have a place where you could go and kind of be okay if God forbids there was any kind of massive attack? I think that particular area, which I'll talk about in another video, in Mexico is as safe as can be, because nobody cares about desert. Nobody cares about Mexico in general, but specifically the Baja Desert, and it is so remote that it's probably going to be one of the safest place on earth if God forbid something like this were to happen. But again, I don't really think about those scenarios. I think that it's highly unlikely, but it is possible, going back to my earlier point, that some politician will make the wrong calculation and some significant result could arise from something like this. So again, be prepared most likely for a situation where there is a curfew, and because of tensions, maybe the results of the next presidential election, maybe some other swan event, black swan event, stock market, what have you. You just need to be in a situation where you can anchor down wherever you are for several weeks and be okay. The last bit that I would mention, of course, is that you should be, I think, at a minimum, working on your health, on your physical, mental toughness. And this is America, so philosophically, I don't necessarily think that tools, aka weapons, are a good thing in general. But in a case like this, is it better to have a weapon to defend yourself, or is it better to just come with a stick? Of course, it's better to have a weapon to defend your family. So everybody to each his own, right? But I certainly exercise my right, and I certainly have the tools and the training to protect myself. I think it makes sense. I have very, very high respect for guns in general, so I don't take that very lightly. But it is also a right that you have and that you should exercise if it makes you feel safer. And again, you need to have the training that goes with that, right? You can't just go and acquire an AR-15 or a semi-automatic weapon, and never have had the opportunity to hold this tool and train. That's dangerous. So, with that said, I really think that we ought to continue to put the pressure on our politicians. We should be very active in trying to prevent any kind of escalation, and we should absolutely recognize that what is true for America is also true for Russia. How would we react if there was a massive military force or base, south of the border from a regime that we would not recognize, maybe somewhere in Mexico? Or the reality is that we don't tend to react until it affects us, right? And because those conflicts are thousands of miles away, we tend to be closing, our eyes, really. And that's the net of it. And I think that it is really a shame. So let me know in your comment, what is it that you're prepared to do or doing in case of a massive blackout? Are you taking steps? I think that the election is coming in 6 months, and there will be some movement. There will be some issues arising. The economy is not doing great either, and that's another video. But ultimately, you don't want to be going at Costco or Walmart in the middle of a major crisis. Is just the bottom line. You should be at home. You should be monitoring what's happening, and you should be vigilant. Another thing that I have done, and that's, I think, a really smart tool, is buy a really nice drone, because reconnaissance is actually a big deal. So being able to have visibility from the comfort of your home to see what's happening around your home is quite nice. And it's cheap. You can get a drone. I have an expensive one, but you can get a nice drone for a couple $100 these days. So these are the steps that I would take. Medication, of course. If you're on medication, you should have a reserve. But water is number one. with your family. The other thing that I have done, which I think is very practical, is to have a bag with the necessities that you can just grab and go. And in that bag, I've got, you know, things to help me cook a meal for probably 2 weeks, straws that clean the water so I can drink from any source. I think that's very, very useful. Of course, light, the availability of light, a safety kit, medical kit is also available, a great pair of shoes, and just things that I just, you know, basic survival that I can just grab and go. Again, not being a survivalist or a prepper at all. It's just, it makes me feel better at night, I guess. You know, if I have to go and leave right away, I could do it in five minutes. So have a plan with your family, discuss those scenarios. One thing is for sure, if the shit hits the fan, as they say, if there is a nuclear attack or something that happens, I think you're okay. You can survive probably if you're at least 25, 30 miles away, but only for a short period of time. So you have to make a decision. Do you want to anchor down or do you want to leave, right? It's something that you have to decide probably now. People can survive a nuclear blast if they are far away enough. What kills you is, you know, obviously the fallout and the radioactivity, right? But if you look at some studies, there are steps that you can take practically to stay in your house and actually potentially be okay for a long while. But let's not think about this too much. Hoping for the best. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please share, like, give me a thumbs up so that YouTube and Google can pick that up on their algorithm. I'll see you soon on the next one, and please check my other videos. Take care.